Welcome to today's edition of the Author's Corner, brought to you by KNEO 91.7 FM The Word. I'm Roberta Foster, and today I welcome Daniel M. Wright to Author's Corner. He's written the book, The Redemption Corridor, which is published by Wright Publishing, and he'll tell you more about how to find the book at the end of the program. Here's a little bit about Daniel. For more than 40 years, he has been an enthusiastic student and teacher of the Bible. He's a self-taught biblical history and archaeological layperson with research experience in Egypt, Jordan, and Israel, including a particular interest in the long history of Jerusalem. And Daniel, thank you so much for being with us on Author's Corner.
Thank you, Roberta. I'm very excited, and thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, so tell us, what is the Redemption Corridor? It's not something I've ever heard of or seen on a map.
Well, it is a term that I invented. It's not a biblical term, but I would say the best way to put it is that there's a terrestrial rectangle, okay, and it runs east to west across the middle of Israel. It includes Jerusalem on its west, and over on the east it includes Mount Nebo, which is in Jordan. Okay. So it goes across the Jordan River. It's a rectangle. It's about 38 miles wide. It's about 17 miles tall. Now, these are not specific sizes or numbers. These are just, I had to pick something when I made an associated map. But it is a place where a fascinating list of biblical events that you would recognize, all biblically literate Christian people would recognize this list of events. They occurred in a sequential way in this strip of land, and I don't think that is accidental.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed as I was looking at your book that your chapters start with the eastern side of the Redemption Corridor and work to the west. And is that because it's historically, chronologically that way? No,
the book actually deals with the geography from the east to the west as a matter of organization. The events that that you read about when you read the book happened at different times. Sometimes they are earlier than others, but certainly the Israelites came to the land of Israel with the knowledge that they would be there, that God was taking them there, and they did arrive from the east. In fact, Moses was at Mount Nebo. So there is a beginning in that sense, and of course we know that they eventually cross the river to the west, and they populate the land, and Jerusalem becomes the site of temples and even the place where Jesus ministers and is eventually crucified. So, there is a beginning and a flow to the west. I think that is true. Okay. Well, in your book, you call this narrow strip of land that you call the Redemption Corridor, you refer to it as a chosen region, even above all others on the earth. So tell us more about that. Well, you're actually quoting from my introduction. So let me go there. Actually, it's right here in front of me. This unique swath of territory was exclusively selected by the God of Israel for His own sovereign work of both implementing and commemorating the redemption of the human race. So I think that it's what you learn later on in the book. I have a fifth chapter that addresses something I think you'll get to, the pattern of Moses, the Tavnit. And so because of that pattern, that's why this strip is, as I described it, what you call it, a narrow strip of terrain, which I believe is a chosen region above all others on the earth, because it's it's the centerpiece of the pattern that God gave Moses, and all of redemption occurs in this strip, or all of the elements necessary to pull off the redemption of the world are happening here. Wow. Yeah. So just to be informative to our listeners, this isn't a book about geography. It's more about the stories of the Bible and, as you've called it, the redemption that God offers. Am I correct? Yes. Is it a biblical geography book? The answer is no. But yes, there are geographical elements in it. The book is more like it's an inventory, okay, of key events that I describe as geo-spiritually aligning with the landscape.
Okay.
So I think it's the events that are important, not so much the landscape is important, but where these things happen. You mentioned the table of contents. There's 4 chapters. There's a region on the east around Mount Nebo. There's a region around the Jordan River. There's a region in the Judean desert wilderness between the Jordan River and Jerusalem, and then there's the area around Jerusalem itself. So those 4 chunks are described in detail, and in those I talk about different biblical events that occur in these areas, and it's unique. It's interesting how they seem to be quite linear. They're related, they're important, they echo one another, and they seem to be linear.
Well, let me just remind the listeners, I'm talking today with Daniel M. Wright regarding his book, The Redemption Corridor, which is published by Wright Publishing, and you are listening to Author's Corner. I'm Roberta Foster. So when I went to Israel way back in, I think it was 1995, I wished I knew the geography of Israel better because the tour was not flowing. One day it would be in the north, and the next day it'd be way down in Jerusalem, and all these different places totally had me confused. So I like the idea that you cover the different events in that particular region, because we can actually learn so much more if we understand the geography, even the topography of the land that is written about in the Bible.
I agree. The thing, though, just for the listeners' sake, everyone I think that's even remotely aware of Israel knows it's kind of it's a slender north to south country. It's about the size of New Jersey. This is just a narrow east-west in the middle, kind of a bar across the center. So I don't, you asked, is this a geography book? The answer is no, but there is geography in it.
Well, you brought up a word that I have not heard of before. So why don't you tell us what this tavnit is and why you talk so much about it in your book?
It's actually pronounced, if you'll forgive me, it's pronounced tavnit, like long E at the end, tavnit. It's a Hebrew word, and it simply means pattern.
Okay.
Framework, as it were. So basically it's the pattern of the Lord. The pattern of Moses. It first comes to light in Exodus 25, Exodus 26. It's in Numbers. It's also mentioned in Hebrews 8, Acts 7 in the New Testament. But it's a pattern that God revealed to Moses in the wilderness, and it became the framework for this emerging civilization. Keep in mind, the Israelites had no culture per se. They had been Egyptian slaves for 4 centuries, so all they had seen was servitude and the Egyptian culture next to them. So God gives them not only a framework for building their worship center, their tabernacle, but it also becomes an outline for the pattern in the wilderness, the way their encampment was laid out, how they would actually march and travel, and associated with it, besides being like geometric pattern, were the Torah, the rules about behavior and what you do and what you don't do, and where you do it and where you don't do it. So the Tavnit is this pattern that God gave to Moses, and I believe that later Jesus knows about this pattern and operates in it. It's something kind of lost to modern Judaism in many ways, particularly in the what's called the diaspora, where Jews are around the world. But this pattern is a framework that worked in the wilderness and was later applied to the land of Israel. And I think that the rules of it are still applicable and still in play, as it were, or certainly were when Jesus was operating in the world. So it's an unseen, if you will, invisible but legal framework that lays on the territory with the sanctuary of God, the temple, the tabernacle, at its center.
Daniel, what is it you hope people will get from reading your book, or what is it you want them to walk away with when they're done reviewing this?
I certainly want them to learn some new things. This is not the sort of thing you hear every day in a church or even a synagogue or whatever. This is a little different, which is why I wrote it. Nobody had written this book. So what I want them to sort of recognize is this is not exclusively a Christian era-focused book. It involves the whole biblical time frame from Abraham through to Jesus. And into the future, too. There's prophetic elements in terms of our shared future. The perspective you get from the understanding the redemption corridor will reveal that God does things in order, that his dealings with Israel and the larger world are orderly. Now, that may be common sense. You can we have an intellectual assent to that, but this shows some specificity around this pattern. Also, I think that the biblical story across many years is obviously associated with the land of Israel generally and Jerusalem in particular. That's really what the Bible is about. The New Testament is just covering a handful of years, really. The Old Testament is the whole history from creation all the way through the Exodus and the years following the kings and all the rest. I think finally that the Lord's biblical enterprise, is for all people. God's truth and his redemptive message is non-denominational. It's non-sectarian. It's an eternal thing, and it's between human beings and their Maker, and I cover that too. I just also want to throw in, I'm not dogmatic about the observations in my book. They're simply my own researched and fact-supported speculations and opinions. I mean, this isn't make or break. It's not designed to be entertainment. It's designed to be informative, and I stand behind the things I point out. But it's not dogmatic. It's not essential, as it were.
Well, you also have, as a part of your book, a map called the Redemption Corridor. It's a full-color map and suitable for framing to put on the wall and learn more about. So, as I understand it, you're responsible for creating this as well.
Yes, all of the visuals in this book and on this map contributed to the long story of actually getting it done. And yes, I did do the art. I mean, I am a professional graphic designer, and I am an artist and an illustrator. So this was a labor of love. The map is almost 24 inches. It's 23.75 by 9 inches. It's got two sides. The main side is of course the corridor, including Jerusalem and running east over to Jordan to Mount Nebo. But the flip side is focused very tightly on the Temple Mount and the Mount of Olives, the Kidron Valley, what I call the Jerusalem Basin, full color. And there's some comments and some messages also associated with that flip side map they're not really a part of the book.
And so, Daniel, why don't you tell our listeners how they can go about getting the book, the map? Do they come together? Are they separate purchases, or how does that go?
There are two paths. There's only one path you can go through to obtain the map with the book. You can also buy the map separately, and that's by going through my friends at Prophecy Watchers in Oklahoma City, prophecywatchers.com. If you go to their store and simply type in the Redemption Corridor, you'll see that there's a book solo, there's the map solo, or you can buy them combined as a package. So that's a way to get the color map. It's also available directly from Amazon. By it, I mean the book only. There are visuals in the book. It's not just text. There's quite a few diagrams, and portions of the map are in the book, although they're black and white, they're grayscale. But you can get the book worldwide on Amazon. It's available in English all around the world. I'm working on making a digital copy and also an audio book version, but that doesn't exist just yet. All
right. Well, today I've been talking with Daniel M. Wright about his book and map, The Redemption Corridor. And so, Daniel, thank you so much for being with us and for providing this book for us today.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to have done so, and thank you for the invitation.
And to our listeners, if you missed any part of today's interview or would like to hear it again, you can find it on your favorite podcast platform or through kneo.org. And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Roberta Foster on the Author's Corner. Join me again next time.
God's Word speaks truth. God's Word speaks life. And God's Word speaks to us today. Hi, I'm Pastor John Mehrens of the Granby Christian Church. Each week we explore God's Word together on In the Shadow of Your Wings, a radio broadcast on KNEO. Tune in each Saturday at 6:45 p.m. to hear the show. And if you ever miss it, you can always view the archive online at kneo.org. We also have the program available as a podcast as well, so you can listen anytime, anywhere. It's available from Sky High Podcast Network. I invite you to check out the show and learn more about our incredible God and how He cares for you. You can trust Him, you can depend on Him, and you can rest in the shadow of His wings.